Meeting with Putin. The U.S. Secretary of State delivers a message to Russia. Sean Spicer, apology.
I think I've let the president down.
The embattled White House press secretary asks for forgiveness after his controversial comments Tuesday. Easter preview. Vatican correspondent Mary Shovlin shows us how Pope Francis will celebrate Holy Week. And building a Catholic community, how people in one Washington, D.C. suburb are living out their faith together. On EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, April 12th, 2017. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. In the middle of a fierce feud over Syria, Russian President Vladimir Putin meets America's top diplomat, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, in Moscow. It's the first face-to-face meeting between Putin and a Trump administration cabinet member. Correspondent Jason Calvi reports.
Secretary of State Rex Tillerson met Vladimir Putin in the Kremlin for almost 2 hours. The meeting was confirmed only at the last minute. The chief dispute between the two world powers: who's responsible for the chemical weapons attack in Syria last week. The United States blames Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, who's backed by Russian forces. Russia says there's no proof.
Where is the proof that Syrian army used chemical weapons? There is none.
Today, Secretary Tillerson admits the two nations have sharp differences.
The current state of U.S.-Russia relations is at a low point. There is a low level of trust between our two countries. The world's two foremost nuclear powers cannot have this kind of relationship.
And before meeting Putin, Tillerson got a chilly reception from Russia's foreign minister. He tells Tillerson Russia was trying to understand the real intentions of the Trump administration. Also looming in the background of today's meetings, the allegation that Russia meddled in the 2016 presidential elections. Putin and Tillerson know each other well from Tillerson's days as ExxonMobil CEO. In Washington, Jason Calvi, EWTN News Nightly.
And today, President Trump tells Fox Business he has no plans to become more deeply involved in Syria. He says he only attacked the airbase because Assad used chemical weapons. President Donald Trump holds talks with the NATO Secretary General at the White House. The president says he backs the military alliance 100%, but he's challenging European members of NATO to step up their monetary support. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee has more from the White House. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. President Trump and NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg are presenting a united front today, but the president says America spends too much when compared to contributions from our 27 partners. Both leaders are calling for an increase in contributions by the time NATO leaders meet on May 25th.
The head of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization greeted by President Trump in the Oval Office. The president stressing his commitment to the military alliance of European and North American democracies. It's a departure from the campaign trail when Donald Trump spared no criticism of NATO.
NATO's obsolete because it's not covering terrorism.
He later switched gears, pledging support in August.
Since my comments, they have changed their policy and now have a new division focused on terror threats. Very good.
NATO was formed after World War II to strengthen international cooperation to counter the rise of the Soviet Union. Since then, it has grown. This week, President Trump signed off on adding Montenegro to the alliance.
The Russians are trying to undermine the democratic process in other parts of the world.
Senator John McCain accuses Russia of interfering in Montenegro's elections last October.
There are behavior on the part of the Russians throughout the region and the world that is not acceptable in these times.
Senator McCain speaking from Montenegro while on a tour of that war-weary region. Here at the White House, President Trump's team is also working in support of an audit of members' military capabilities, showing where NATO countries need to invest. Lauren?
Wyatt, how does the president aim to convince other NATO members to pay what they promised?
Yes, well, in 2014, the NATO members agreed to contribute at least 2% of their GDP to the alliance defense spending. The U.S. spends more than all the others combined, and most haven't met their obligations yet. So the White House says they'll work with those members to draft and deliver their own plans by the end of this year, outlining how they intend to live up to that pledge. Lauren?
Wyatt Goolsbee at the White House. Thank you, Wyatt. White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer apologizes for comparing Syria's president to Adolf Hitler after criticism from Jewish groups.
It really is painful to myself to know that I did something like that, because that obviously was not my intention. And to know when you screw up that you possibly offended a lot of people, I just, and so I would ask obviously for folks' forgiveness to understand that I should not have tried to make a comparison. There's no comparing atrocities.
During an event this morning, Spicer added he let the president down. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi is calling for Spicer to be fired. Presidential advisor Kellyanne Conway spoke at the same event in Washington. She says President Trump uses social media to cut out the middleman and communicate directly with people. Conway was asked to evaluate the president's relationship with the media.
I'll just give an I incomplete, meaning I think it's way too early to render a specific judgment, let alone a grade on the relationship between this president, this administration, and the press.
Conway wants to improve the relationship with the press, but she says there's a reason the president decided to skip this year's White House Correspondents' Dinner. Republicans keep the Kansas House seat up for grabs in yesterday's special election. Republican Ron Estes won the election to replace current CIA Director Mike Pompeo. The seat was considered a shoo-in for Republicans until the Democratic base stepped up ads for its candidate, James Thompson. The polls tightened. Yesterday's election was seen as the first test for the GOP since President Trump took office. Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. One suspect is detained in an attack on a German soccer team's bus that could be linked to terrorism. 3 explosions went off near the Borussia Dortmund team bus as the group set off Tuesday for its Champions League quarterfinal match against Monaco. 1 soccer player was injured. Investigators found 3 copies of a note left at the scene demanding the withdrawal of German jets assisting in the fight against ISIS. Egypt beefs up security outside churches ahead of Easter. They're trying to prevent more terrorist attacks like the one that killed 45 people on Palm Sunday. Those 2 attacks, ISIS says that they are against Coptic Christians and threatens more. A court in the UK says doctors can remove life support for an 8-month-old baby against the wishes of the parents. Little Charlie Gard has a life-threatening illness. His parents wanted to bring him to the U.S. for experimental treatment, but the hospital argued his quality of life is so poor that he should be allowed to die. A judge sided with the hospital. Support won't be pulled just yet as his parents consider an appeal. You can read more about this story, including how much money a GoFundMe account has raised, online at our news partner, CatholicNewsAgency.com. A Chinese bishop is reportedly detained in an attempt to stop Mass in his diocese on Holy Thursday. UCA News says Bishop Vincent was asked by the government's Religious Affairs Office to attend a 20-day learning class. While the Chinese government doesn't recognize Bishop Vincent, the Holy See does. The bishop was set to preside at his first Chrism Mass that takes place on Holy Thursday morning. It symbolizes unity among the clergy. Pope Francis says true love involves laying down one's life, a gesture, he says, that can look like defeat.
Chi ama perde potere.
At his weekly meeting with pilgrims in St. Peter's Square, the Pope said one who loves loses power. To love, he said, is a gift. Francis called these days of Holy Week days of love and gave everyone a homework assignment.
Immaginiamo adesso il crocifisso.
The Pope says, contemplate the cross of Christ and say to the Lord, you are my hope. Pope Francis will celebrate Holy Week in both unique and traditional ways. Vatican correspondent Mary Shevlin reports from Rome.
Holy Week celebrations in Rome are a tradition that is centuries old. The apostles walked these very streets, and some were martyred here. Today, 2,000 years later, the successor of St. Peter continues these sacred traditions. On Holy Thursday morning, Pope Francis will celebrate the Chrism Mass in St. Peter's Basilica. Later that evening, he'll preside at the Mass of the Lord's Supper at a prison on the outskirts of Rome. On Good Friday, the Way of the Cross takes place at Rome's Colosseum. At the Pope's request, the reflections this year were written by a French woman who is a biblical scholar. Romans packed the streets to follow along. The Easter Vigil will be held in St. Peter's on Holy Saturday. Darkness gives way to light, and Christ's resurrection is proclaimed. On Easter Sunday, Pope Francis will say Mass in St. Peter's Square and give his solemn blessing to the Church and to the world. And for the next 50 days, the Church celebrates Easter until Pentecost. In Rome, Mary Shovlin, EWTN News Nightly.
Coming up, hundreds of Nigerian schoolgirls still missing, years after they were abducted. What we're learning about their fate. And devastating famine. The plight of people in South Sudan. Nigeria says it stopped a plot by Boko Haram militants to attack U.S. and British embassies in the country's capital. Officers arrested 6 suspects in connection with the case. This week marks 3 years since Boko Haram kidnapped 276 Nigerian schoolgirls. We are joined by human rights lawyer Emmanuel Agobe, who is the guardian to 5 of the Nigerian girls. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Lauren.
Tell me about the girls. Where are they now?
Well, if you're talking about the missing ones or the ones...
I'm sorry, the 5 girls. The 5 girls that you have, fair. Right? Yeah.
I don't know where the others are. But yes, the girls are doing very well. We have some girls in college. The only girl in the United States who is in college, the only Chibok girl, is actually schooling here in the D.C. area. She's doing exceptionally well. She just turned 21. And she's getting her driver's license this week.
Look out,
so
world.
DC, beware.
Right. You know, what is the current situation with the girls? We don't know where they are. Yeah. They escaped. Those girls escaped. 200 are missing. Where are they?
Well,
are they alive?
It's disturbing because the government claims that they've cleared the forest, the famous Sambisa forest, where the girls were taken into, but there are no girls. So that's very problematic. Now, by the numbers, you know, in the last 2 years of this administration, only about 23 girls have emerged, which is less than half the number of girls that came out in the previous administration. So it's worrisome that the numbers are very low.
Okay, so you were recently in Nigeria. What is the situation today? Is there hope?
Well, I can tell you it's deeply troubling. Some of the girls who are here in the States, their homes have been attacked again within the past few months. And
they're Nigerian homes?
Yes, they're Nigerian homes. And they have relocated to other cities, so they've been displaced. Now, in addition to that, while I was in Nigeria, Boko Haram unleashed one of its worst suicide bombing sprees ever. They deployed 5 people as suicide bombers in one day. So this isn't a terrorist group that has gone away. It's still very potent and people are still very terrified.
Why do they have so much power?
Well, Boko Haram is literally extending or scaling up a discriminatory policy that has operated against Christians in northern Nigeria for many years. Churches have been demolished by state governments in Nigeria this year. And last year and the year before.
So nothing is happening that's changing. Is that what you're telling me?
Well, the only real difference is that previously girls escaped, but last year for the first time we had girls released. But what is worrisome is whatever trick the government pulled off that time, they haven't done any more.
So they've only released 23, but that's it. And
they released 21.
You don't know if there are more coming or not?
We don't know because the government promised in weeks more would come out. It's now been 6 months. So what happened? Have the terrorists lost faith in the government and vice versa? We don't know what happened.
Well, thank you for giving us that update, Emmanuel Agobe, guardian to 5 of the Nigerian girls who did escape from Boko Haram 3 years ago.
Thank you so much, Lauren, and have a happy Easter.
You too. A big milestone for Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI. He turns 90 on Sunday. Since Sunday is Easter, there won't be a big celebration for his birthday, but his brother, Monsignor Georg Ratzinger will be with him. The retired Pope's personal secretary, Archbishop Georg Ganswein, tells EWTN Germany that for 90, Benedict is doing very well.
With 90 years, the forces are diminishing. But he's well, the sense of humor is very important, and I think he is in peace with himself.
Less than 2 weeks ago, our EWTN Rome office met with Benedict XVI. He greeted each member and asked them about their families. The Pope Emeritus thanked the EWTN staff for their work. We wish him a very happy birthday. Up next, Underground Museum, how historic artifacts ended up in a subway. And the beauty of faith. See how Christ's passion is captured in art. Welcome back on this Holy Wednesday, otherwise known as Spy Wednesday, in reference to Judas' betrayal of Jesus. He's shown in artwork as the apostle who kisses Jesus on the cheek to show soldiers who to arrest. National Public Radio reported a story this week about a Maryland community embracing their Catholic faith in everyday life.
The parish life was very important to us, and the idea that a parish isn't just a place where you come on Sunday for a couple hours.
Well, joining us now is, look who it is, Jason Calvi, our own reporter, who is a member of that community in Hyattsville, and Jane Murphy, a neighbor of Jason's and a parishioner of St. Jerome's Parish in Hyattsville, Maryland. Thank you both for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Jane, tell me why you live there.
Well, first of all, my sister lived there, and then she told me about the great Catholic community.
What is it? What is this
Well,
community?
it's a large number of Catholic families who take their faiths very seriously, and they live intentionally, and they want to live in close proximity to each other so that we can support each other.
How many people, Jason, are in this community?
About 150 families and a lot of kids, that's for sure.
And you guys just are there people who are not Catholic who live in this community?
Certainly,
yeah.
yes.
It's a historic area. There's lots of old houses, old Victorians, and so there's a lot of people that are Catholic there that move there because they want to live with other Catholics close by, within walking distance, but there's also many, many people that live there that are not Catholic or even don't have any faith at all and are maybe even secular.
So why do you live there? Why?
It's made all the difference in my life.
How
right?
so?
Just being surrounded by people within a walk to the parish, so that the parish becomes the centerpiece of your daily life. But then there's things that are happening all week, not just the 2 masses a day, but there's Bible studies. So my wife is at home with the kids, 3 kids. And
under 4.5.
Under 4.5. And so she's home with the kids all day, but Tuesday is Rosary Moms, where a group like Jane meets and they pray the Rosary together, and the toddlers run around and have a lot of fun. There's Bible study, there's Montessori co-ops, there's just things happening all week for the moms to really shape the kids and pass on the Catholic faith.
Well, let's listen, Jane, to what NPR ran as one of your quotes.
It wasn't until coming into this community that I became much more spiritual about my faith and discovering the joy that comes with my spiritual life and growing my spiritual life.
What does that mean specifically, your spiritual life? How did you grow?
Well, for when I started wearing a scapular.
And there it is, the brown scapular.
And as part of that, I do say the Rosary every day as well. And growing in my spiritual life meant a lot more spiritual reading and reading about the saints and things like that. Growing up, I had a much more intellectual faith. And but growing my prayer life has been so essential to my spiritual life.
And is that because you are in this community?
Largely, yes, because I have that support, which I did not have growing up, for instance. I did not have and I grew up in a Catholic family, but we didn't have that community to rely on. And just having that community now gives me the confidence I need to grow my spiritual life.
Jason, how can other parishes do this? Is it just something that happened?
I think you need to find, we have in our community Chris Curry, who's sort of the godfather of the city. He moved there 20 years ago, and then he invited a sister to move in, and over the last 20 years, then other Catholic families have steadily moved in as well. Every single year they're bringing in more and more Catholics to live there because they want to live so close to other Catholics. So I think if you can live within a parish boundary where you're able to walk to dinner and we have prayers once in a while on Sunday nights where we have potlucks and things like that are happening. I mean, I think the key is to invite people into your spiritual life, to not be afraid to say, hey, would you like to come to Mass, and let's have a potluck afterwards, or let's have fellowship, coffee and donuts afterwards. I think that's the big key for us in Hyattsville.
Tell us about St. Jerome's Academy. Do you have children there?
I do, yeah. So I have 2 children in the preschool there. And it's just been a wonderful experience, and faith is such a huge part of their daily life in that classroom as well.
And are your kids there? No,
my kids,
under 4.5. I don't think so.
Well, there's other things that are shaping and forming them in their Catholic faith. So like going to Rosary Moms, where they hear the moms praying the Rosary once a week together on Tuesday mornings, I think just teaches the kids, whether they're probably running around during the Rosary, but it just teaches them that we're taking our faith seriously. We're going to make prayer a center of what we do, and it's such a beautiful thing.
It is your life. It's not something that you do on a Sunday. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciated our own Jason Calvi here with us, and Jane Murphy.
Thank you.
Thanks.
As we celebrate Holy Week, I talked to the Beauty of Faith author Gem Sullivan about how one artist portrayed Jesus' sacrifice. Gem, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome, Lauren.
Let's take a look at Matthias Grunewald's 16th century painting, The Small Crucifixion. This is an image that we see all the time, a very sacred and familiar image to most Catholics. What's different about this interpretation?
This painting, Lauren, is a visual homily on the sacred event we will celebrate on Good Friday, and perhaps it is one of the most powerful, moving images of our Lord's crucifixion ever painted, because Grunewald draws us into the intense physical suffering that Jesus endured for our sake. The full horror of a crucifixion. We see Jesus' bruised and scourged body hanging from the cross. And there's something more than just the weight of his body. It is the weight of sinful humanity, bending the crossbeams downward to the earth. Jesus' clothes are tattered. His head bleeds from the crown of thorns pressed into his forehead. But it's the nails in his hands and feet and his fingers reaching out to heaven in anguish that really captures our eye.
How does Grunewald depict his own faith in this painting?
You know, Jesus was innocent, and yet he endured the humiliation of the cross. When Grunewald painted this image, it was originally for a hospital chapel. And so this is an image of consolation, so that the patients could see their physical suffering somehow united with Jesus' suffering, that they were not alone in their suffering, that God himself in Jesus was suffering with them and for them.
Who else is in this painting? We see 3 people, one kneeling.
Yes, at the foot of the cross stands Mary, the mother of Jesus, Mary Magdalene, and St. John. And really their viewpoint is meant to be our viewpoint as we stand before the cross on Good Friday in a few days, and really draw strength from Jesus' suffering and death, which was poured out for our salvation.
How does this painting prepare us for the resurrection? And we can see this at the National Gallery of Art. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, this image really draws us into the full horror of the crucifixion, but it's also to remind us that the full price of our redemption was nothing less than the blood that Jesus poured out of love for us. And so it's really the fullness of divine, incarnate, crucified love that is poured out on the world, poured out for you and for me and for all of us. And that is the great gift, really, of these holy days ahead of us.
Gem Sullivan, thank you so much, author of The Beauty of Faith.
Thank you so much, Lauren.
A new metro station in Rome is doubling as a museum with artifacts dating back over several millennia. Construction of the station uncovered historical remains right next to the Basilica of San Giovanni. The collection was just unveiled and includes marble panels, coins, and remains dating back to the Roman era. Items will be on display on all 3 floors when the metro station opens next year. And finally, we want to congratulate EWTN CEO and Chairman of the Board, Michael Warsaw. The Holy Father appointed him an advisor to the Vatican Secretariat of Communications, along with 13 others. He'll have a role in advising Pope Francis and the Holy See on matters related to media. Mr. Warsaw is pictured here on the left with the head of the office, Monsignor Vigano. He says he's grateful to the Holy Father for the appointment. That does it for us, for all of us here at EWTN News Nightly. To all of you around the world, I'm Lauren Ashburn. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. We hope you have a blessed Holy Week and happy Easter. We'll see you again Monday. Good night and God bless.